Love is in the air. Noble Knight is back again. And this time they've got a brand new coupon code for the month of February. Hey everybody, it's your old buddy Hambone, and Noble Knight has reached out and they've thrown another amazing discount code our way. This time the code is Love to Play. That is LOVETOPLAY. And it is good for $5 off any order of $25 or more running from February the 3rd through February the 29th. Now, our friends over at Noble Knight are absolutely amazing. And whether you are there to buy some RPGs, whether you're going to buy some classic games, board games, card games, dice games, Noble Knight's going to have what you're looking for. Now, this code is good for in-store or online, so you get the best of both worlds. If you're shopping online, this is a good way to get yourself $5 off an order of $25 or more. Or if you're lucky enough to live in walking distance or even driving distance, you can walk on up to the counter and use the code Love to Play to get $5 off any order of $25 or more. Now that is LOVETOPLAY, and this code is good from February 3rd to February 29th. So don't forget to use the code Love to Play at checkout at Noble Knight Games, and may the dice always roll in your favor.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs, with your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. I asked him if he had mushroom in the clubhouse, and he said, yeah, I built more shelves. Stu Horvath.
That's terrible.
Listen, they don't know land, man.
I mean, fair. And our topic for today is a bit of a tough one.
I mean, I really did not have a lot to work with, Stu. Why don't you tell the listeners about this fabulous fungal book that you have?
It's called Fungi of the Far Realms, and it is by Alex Clements and illustrated by Shuyi Zhang. And I think that we just live in a beautiful time.
For RPGs, absolutely.
That goes without saying.
I mean, there's got to be a little qualifier here. Yeah. Everything else is a dumpster fire.
So this is a book that chronicles over 200 different types of fantasy fungus.
So it's a monster manual for mushrooms.
Yes, but it doesn't even get into that much detail. Each fungus has a full-color watercolor plate.
Wow.
And they're lovely. I love this art. Done sort of in the style of like a botanical scientific manual. And you have notes on habitat, appearance, flavor, mouthfeel, and aroma.
What? Come on. Really?
Yeah.
That's actually like, this is a creature you're going to come up against. It's a mushroom, and this is what the mouth feels like.
Oh, no. These aren't creatures. These are literally mushrooms. So your characters can go off into the woods and find these mushrooms and eat them if they're feeling brave.
And it's an entire book about mushrooms.
It is.
I love it.
Most of them, you're just relying on the entry. There's no rules for most of them, although there are implied effects of many of them, but it's left to you to decide.
So there's nothing specifically like, it's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge magic mushroom.
I mean, there are, but there's no rules attached to it. So in the back of the book, there's maybe 10 pages of rules for specific mushrooms and how to handle them.
Poisonous mushrooms?
Periodically, it says possibly poisonous, like stuff like that. It's all very vague, all very meant to stoke your DM. We don't work blue, but the word is fuckery.
Listen, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
If you're going to drop an F-bomb, this is exactly what it's for.
And this is from the Melsonian Arts Council, which is an outfit in England that has brought us Troika, which you might know about. We'll talk about it another time. And also the intriguingly named Wet Grandpa.
What?
Yeah, they're super weird and mysterious to me. And like, I've read Troika and it's freaking genius. And then I have this. I didn't even know that this was the same folks that did Troika because I kickstarted this. I just saw this on Kickstarter. It came up in my suggestions and I was like, a 300-page book about fantasy fungus? Sold! I didn't even think about it. I was just immediately like, well, how do I get the hardcover book?
Just a little sidebar for our listeners. If you've got a Kickstarter and you're kickstarting something really weird, Stu's a mark.
Beautiful book, though.
It is a beautiful book.
My mom, when she was a little girl, she had this series of books. It's sort of just like great books, like Tale of Two Cities, The Prince and the Pauper, Sherlock Holmes stories. And they're all like hardbound with stamped art on the cover. And this has the same kind of retro feel. And it's a really nicely bound book. Like this is like a high quality book with nice matte pages, full color.
Oh, I do like a good stamped cover.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you. This is one of my favorite RPG books ever made. That
Really?
I've ever read, yes, for a couple of different reasons. One, because it's about time-wasting stuff in your game. This is literally a book for encouraging your players to go hunt mushrooms periodically and to support that endeavor and to support whatever hijinks might ensue from that. It just injects like a dose of weirdness and it encourages it in a massive way.
And it's not even like a quest. It's just, hey, you're in the forest.
Yeah. Like, oh, we're hunting owlbear, but, I have a taste for mushrooms. Why don't we go see if there's any mushrooms around, And in the introduction, he calls it grit. His thing is that fantasy worlds, particularly in role-playing, are necessarily very smooth and clean and polished because you don't have time to kind of meander.
Right, there's no time to grind.
Yeah, and this is a sort of way to encourage your characters to do something that has no real practical benefit to their characters or the story or anything. It's just something that they do. And this goes back to that one moment in our D&D campaign where everybody wanted to see the astral whale when we're on the astral plane. And it's like served no purpose. And like, I don't think I even described it well, but it was like a super memorable moment for everybody because like everybody just got to like be floating in the astral plane looking at an astral whale and pretending to know what that was like. And like that might be the most memorable moment of the entire campaign.
It was one of the more special moments of the campaign. I definitely liken it to when you're watching your favorite show or your favorite movie and the cast of characters has that one moment where they're just together and they're just enjoying a moment.
Yeah.
Everything's happening around them, but it's still set outside of either what's happening or what's about to happen. And usually what's about to happen is about to be really bad for somebody.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you put it that way, I really do like the idea of it because there is something to be said about side quests, or not even like really a side quest, just something that you do in game that really does flesh out the world a little more. Because even when you have a dungeon master, a game master who is working in an open sandbox, there is always that element of we're still kind of on the rails because you're still in a story.
Yeah, like you can't detail the entire world, right? You have a certain amount of tunnel vision to the point of the game. And deviation from that, it's not that it's not encouraged, it's just that it's the first thing that gets pushed out for expediency's sake. And the thing I love about this is that even though this is focused on mushrooms, I like the idea that by introducing, hey, you guys can go look for mushrooms, it also gives players the opportunity to think of other weird, pointless things that they can do that might add layers of interest and memory to the game.
Well, yeah, because you're not going to remember every single goblin that you kill.
No.
But that one time you went off on a trail and started picking mushrooms, yeah, I mean, I get it. I do get it. It's hard to wrap my head around as a person who has a very limited time to play games and a very limited time to run games. However, there is something special going back to that astral whale moment where if it doesn't necessarily involve killing or going on your main quest or only just staying on objective, it might be really fun. Because, look, you're people playing a role-playing game. You're not an actual military kill force.
Yep.
You're in a world that's not your own. You should be able to explore and experience different things and different ideas and go find mushrooms in the forest.
Yeah. And I mean, you have a certain amount of expectation when you're fighting goblins in a dungeon, right? You have no idea what's going to happen when you go hunting for mushrooms.
No. And by rights, in a fantasy world, would there be a truffle pig? Or what would the truffle pig be in a fantasy world?
Yeah. Especially for some of these weird-ass mushrooms. And that's the other thing that I really love about this is that it's so idiosyncratic, and they just go for it. There's over 200 different kinds of mushrooms. They're all super strange and weird, and lots of them are gross. Some of them have like weird pop culture call outs. Like there's the Babel mushroom, which allows you to, like the Babel fish in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, allows you to understand all languages for a period of time after you've eaten it. But also they add in the effect that if you eat too much of it, you lose the ability to understand languages at all.
Wow.
Right? And like that's such a cool little touch. And like these mushrooms could be anywhere. Like there's no rules for like how they grow, or like just the fact that there's 200 of them. I'm sure there's more than 200 different types of fungus in the real world, but I have no concept of that.
Dude, I used to work in a produce department. I can name you like 11, maybe 12 kinds of mushrooms, 13 if I count the kind my buddy grew in his garage. Different kind of party. But 200 something, man, that's crazy. And they're all beautifully, for those listening at home, they're all beautifully drawn and designed.
Unique, too. Every single one is like strange and identifiable as its own thing.
A mushroom is a pretty specific shape.
Yeah.
So to come up with 200 different variations on a theme, man, that's tough. I give them a lot of credit for that.
It's just one of those things where I bought this book. I literally had no idea, and I didn't look up into what it was going to be. I just committed to buying it. It came to my house, and then I was blown away by just how they just went for it. And it's just so great and idiosyncratic. And this kind of goes to something that I've been thinking a lot about since we interviewed Daniel Fox, about how like there's this indie movement in role-playing games and there's this OSR movement in role-playing games, and something seems to be happening where there's like a new thing that's coming out of both of them that's weird and wild and strange and idiosyncratic. And like, yes, this is a super niche book. Like, this is not for everybody.
Oh, you think?
It's expensive, but it is beautiful. It's 40 pounds. I don't know what the exchange rate is at the moment.
It changes by the time this podcast airs. So.
Yeah. But I love that there's somebody making this. And I love that it's so strange and different. And I think that the whole history of role-playing games is fantastic and varied, but there was never anything like this.
Oh, no.
And this is such a product of now. And it's such a fantastic example of how weird and strange this world that we are a part of is. And that is why it is one of my favorite books of all time.
Well, Stu, I mean, I am just impressed that we did like 13 minutes on a book about mushrooms.
I knew that this was going to be a fun and unusual one.
So Stu shows up at my house and he's like, hey, we're going to record this episode today. We're doing this episode, and we're doing the mushroom book that I got in the mail the other day. And I'm like, okay, what episode is that a part of? He goes, nah, man, we're just doing one on the mushrooms. So, hey, you know what? I think it's a credit to the quality of the book. I think it's a credit to the ingenuity of the creators to come up with something so left of center. It wound up on our radar, and it was so much more impressive than either of us could have imagined it to be. And shout out to everyone who kickstarted this book, because apparently there's a lot more people out there who like this kind of thing than Stu. And I think that's great, because that means there is a lot of cool stuff on the horizon in the RPG world for everyone to try out and have fun with.
I think that's absolutely true. I think that the more stuff like this that comes out that's high quality and just off the wall bonkers indicates the health and robustness of the hobby and how it's going to go forward in the next decade. This is such like a horizon book for me. I see so much more potential. Things are going to get so weird.
And folks, that's all Stu's ever wanted from RPGs.
It's true. And I think that this is the thing that's going to break me from my 5th edition. Like, why isn't it weird? You know, it doesn't need to be weird because these people are making it weird. This could never be made by Hasbro.
Of course not.
Like, or even most of the major independent role-playing game manufacturers. Like, this is what you get when you get highly motivated independent creators using the modern printmaking capabilities to just put out fantastic products that are just super niche and wonderful.
Well, folks, I'd ask Stu for his final thoughts, but he's already too excited.
My final thought is that you should check out the Melsonian Arts Council online. They have a lot of weird stuff that I have not even yet checked out. It's melsonia.com, melsonia.com. Check out their stuff and find people like them and support weird stuff.
So that was another awesome episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. I'm just as shocked as you are that we did 15 minutes on fungus. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at VintageRPG every day talking about fantasy fungus.
This is very true. You can find me on Twitter at Handbreaker. I tweet about cute animals. I tweet about Dungeons and Dragons. I tweet about professional wrestling. You can follow my day-to-day adventures about podcasting and life on Instagram at John Hambone McGuire. And you can check out my other podcast, My Thai Happy Hour, wherever podcasts are found. Folks, don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to our podcast. The more of those we get, the more people are able to find us, and we always appreciate more people coming to the party. You can also check out our Patreon for bonus content. That's at patreon.com/vintagerpg. And for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.